Abid Hussein, welcome to Midlife on Earth. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time to do so. Um, Tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from, and yeah, a little bit about your background.
So I'm a podiatrist. I'm a consultant podiatrist, and I have been for quite some time, since 1995. I treat not just feet. So I treat primarily feet and lower limb conditions, but I also look at hip and knees and lower leg type sporting injuries. And I have a passion for sports medicine. That's really my passion.
Today, we're going to talk about feet, and in particular, runners' feet. And I can talk from personal experience here. I know I've run for many years, and I've lost more toenails than I like to remember over that time. So can you tell us? I mean, first and foremost, what are the most sort of common issues that affect people and runners in particular in terms of their feet?
So it really depends on the type of runner we have. Okay. So I see runners that do ultra marathons all the way through to 5K, 10K, and then your London Marathon runners. But regarding foot injuries in general, I think if I was to talk about foot injuries, there may be five of the most common ones. So plantar fasciitis or plantar fasciosis, which is the heel pain, quite common. Achilles tendonitis, I see a fair bit of Achilles tendonitis, and that can be categorized into two different types of Achilles tendonitis, which is either at the insertion, right at the bottom of the heel, or mid portion of the Achilles, so slightly further up. Pain around the big toe area, so that is also very common. So that can be from something like a bunion or limited motion in the big toe. Toenail problems in general, so that could be from everything from a damaged toenail to an ingrowing toenail to other inflammation around the nail bed, so it's called paronychia. That can be quite common. And then one of the most common things I see is like mediotibial stress syndrome, which unfortunately people call shin splints. It's not the right term to use, but shin pain is quite common in runners, and I see quite a bit of that. So all of these different conditions would be treated differently.
Looking at some of those in particular, I know from personal experience, Achilles tendonitis is really one of those really annoying issues because there's not much you can do for it. It's just, I remember being told to sort of do heel drops off a step was pretty much all I could do to look after it. Are there certain injuries that are more treatable than others? Is the foot in general a difficult area to treat?
I think it's the challenges around running injuries. So before we get into treatments and how we treat it, why we treat it, we need to understand why runners get injuries. So that's probably the most important thing I want runners to understand. So all tissues, regardless of where they are, they operate within an envelope of function. So your body is used to doing a certain amount of activity. So for example, we had the London Marathon last week. I was really busy for a couple of weeks because I had loads of runners that were training for the London Marathon, and they suddenly spiked up their training to compete for the London Marathon, and they got injuries. So there was a lot of treatment, and that treatment could be a variety of different protocols that we could use, some like shockwave laser injections. Other things to take into consideration is your running shoes. Probably one of the most important things to take into consideration. I remember about a decade ago, there was a fad about barefoot running, and I was getting loads of running injuries, different kinds of running injuries. Metatarsal stress fractures was very common. I was seeing a lot of them. But your running shoe and the amount of drop that you have in your running shoe plays a big role, for example, in Achilles tendonitis. The running surface. So if you go from running on a pavement to running on grass, your ligaments and muscles are going to behave differently because the amount of ground reaction forces going through your body is completely different. So you really need to bear that in mind. When a runner gets tired, you change the way you run and your posture of running, okay? You will lean forward, your running stride may be different. we know now that running mechanics plays a massive role in patellofemoral joint pain, which is like knee pain. And it also plays a role in Achilles tendonitis and heel pain. So your running gait, your running mechanics are really important. Now, we don't have enough running coaches in the UK. There are some really good ones in London, but we don't have enough in general. So these are all the factors, and I haven't even touched upon diet, sleep, hormones, multiplicity of factors.
And what you've done is you've listed a whole lot of things there that can affect and lead to injuries.
Yeah.
With all that in mind, from what I'm hearing, is it safe to say that change is the enemy of the runner unless it's handled gradually? Whether you're changing your shoes, the intensity, or the amount you're running, the frequency you're running, if you change any of those things suddenly, that's going to be, from what I'm hearing, that's bad. So perhaps, is that the thing? Change has to be handled, whatever it is, has to be handled in the right way.
Absolutely. So when I work with elite athletes, I'm always talking to the physios and the running coach or the training coach, for example, to how quickly have they increased their step, how quickly have they stepped up their activities for a particular event. So I will always be working alongside the physiotherapist and the coach. With my amateur athletes, I get them to log the miles they're doing and to see has there been any spike. Now, that change, for example, it may not always be the fact that you have upped up too quickly. So, for example, if you got a cold tomorrow, Tim, and you were off for a couple of weeks, I wouldn't expect you to go back to running at the same intensity and the same mileage straight away to what you were doing 2 weeks before, because you may be more prone to an injury. And we've got fairly good evidence to suggest that. So yes, change can be an issue. However, it really depends on the history of training that you have had over a considerable amount of time. Some athletes are more acclimatized to excessive loads of training. So, for example, my ultra marathon runners, they are crazy. They can run like I've never seen anybody have, but they can run through pain as well. So there's like a psychological element to it because it's completely different to somebody that just runs a 10K run. So there's different types of runners.
Sure. You mentioned earlier on as well about shoes. Obviously, crucially important, but buying the wrong pair, and sometimes you can only try them on in the shop, but buying the wrong pair can be an expensive mistake sometimes. What advice would you give to somebody in terms of, when you are choosing your shoes? What are the things you need to bear in mind so that you don't make that expensive mistake and end up buying a pair that's going to do you more damage than good?
So one of my bugbears is runners going to runners shops and a member of staff putting the runner on a treadmill who's probably done a half-a-day course on biomechanics and looking at the back of the foot.
Hands up, I'm guilty of that. I've been to a shop and I've been on the treadmill. That's me.
Oh my God, I think you're overpronating, which is a lot of BS, by the way. I would recommend, if you're unsure, stick with nothing that is too supportive. So, for example, a Brooks, for example, Beast running shoe is a really supportive shoe. Asics 2000 GTs are not bad for mild pronation. Saucony's are pretty good. The New Balance range is very, very good. I would opt for a mid-range running shoe. Some of the elite running shoes are with the rocker bottom, with the fiberglass rocker bottom that will aid you in running faster. They can lead to other injuries. I think what happens in a lot of my runners come to my clinic, they've read a magazine and thought, oh, this is a good shoe. And they'll change the shoe and then they'll get a metatarsal stress fracture or something else like an Achilles injury. So if you're unsure, speak to a podiatrist. Speak to a podiatrist who assesses runners on a regular basis.
Sure. Good advice. What about other things that might influence in your feet and your susceptibility to things like blisters and toenails going and that kind of thing? Do things like socks make a difference to any sort of everyday things like that?
Socks too, yeah. Everyday things like hyperhidrosis. If a patient sweats too much, they're more likely to develop certain skin conditions, nail conditions. Hygiene, things like that can lead to fungal nail infections. Socks that are not made from a material that is going to help dissipate sweat can make a difference. To be honest, those type of running injuries are not serious running injuries. Like blisters. I mean, my colleague went to the London Marathon, and he actually helped out during the London Marathon. So he primarily saw blisters. People can still run through blisters. It'll be uncomfortable, but it won't stop them from running. The other foot and ankle injuries can stop them from running, like an ankle sprain. If you've damaged the ligaments on the outside of your ankle, probably a bit more serious than a blister or a ingrowing toenail. But inappropriate nail cutting can lead to ingrowing toenails.
Okay, so tell me what is the right way to cut your nails then? What do you cut them round, or do you cut them flat, or is there a different? Is there another way?
Cut them straight across. Don't go down too much into the sides, and always don't cut them too short. So a lot of runners like to cut them too short because they don't want to keep cutting their nails. Leave a little bit of nail there. It's when the patient cuts them too short, it gets an ingrowing toenail, and then we've got to generally we've got to give you local anesthetic and take the spike out.
Okay, and you mentioned blisters there as well. The key question with blisters: do you pop or not?
Sounds like the old age question. If it's too painful to run on them, you can, and then put a sterile dressing on it. Generally, no. I tend to leave them alone. But some runners have come to me and they're huge. They can't step on them at all. So then we've got to drain them and put some sterile dressings on them.
Is there anything specifically we should be doing for our feet in terms of just looking after our feet, other than just getting in the shower and keeping them clean? Is there anything we should be doing specifically every day just to look after our feet?
Thinking about the body holistically rather than just the foot. But there are some exercises where you can do to pick up a ball or some marbles with your toes that helps strengthen the intrinsic muscles of the foot. And generally making sure you're massaging your feet. I think there's a huge role to be played upon how much flexibility you have in your calf muscles that can possibly lead to a foot and ankle injury. So making sure you're stretching before and after, and you're also building up strength. So we know, for example, we've got three calf muscles. So you've got your gastrocnemius, it's got two heads, and then you've got a deeper muscle, which is your soleus muscle. If you've got weakness in the soleus muscle, which is the deeper of the calf muscle, you're more likely to get running injury. Now, we've got good evidence on that now. So doing some exercises to strengthen the soleus muscle can have an impact on reducing the incidence of running injuries in your feet, which is great to know.
Okay, fantastic. That's the thing I think that a lot of people don't know. Certainly, those of us who don't have your expertise, we know everything's connected, but it's difficult to know what you need to do where that has an impact on your feet. So it's fascinating. Abid, thank you very much for joining us. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to do so. That's been fantastic. Let's catch up next time on sort of other injuries from hip to foot. But that's been fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.